So I really liked the final boss of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet. Basically, the entire Way Home storyline was one of my favorite experiences in a Pokémon game relative to how long it actually was. For what they did pack into this final hour of gameplay, I was impressed and really wanted even more, but I feel like a good amount of it is built off of two characters, the Professor and the Professor. Because I played Scarlet version first, I might refer to them as Professor Sada for a good amount of the video, but of course both Sada and Toto are pretty interchangeable. During the lead up to the release of these games, the Professor was notably absent from a lot of trailers and promotional material. Maybe a handful of people picked up on this, but for the most part we were all too distracted with the things they did show. Oh, they're the Professors, of course they're gonna be in the game. Until we come to find out they're actually inside Area Zero and communicate with us via phone for a majority of the story. What we do learn about them is in relation to Arven, as he's their son. And finally we get to the point where the story feels just about finished and we've never seen them face to face. It's kind of funny how the usual trek from one gym to the next, one Titan to another, didn't feel all that different from traditional Pokemon games by having the Professor absent, only popping in to give us minimal exposition and a tutorial every so often. Because when we think about what the role of a Professor in a Pokemon game really is, well, it's pretty much just that. Get us started on the adventure and tell us some useful information every now and then. As much as we love Professor Oak, he really only shows up to give us a Pokemon and then congratulate us at the very end. Starting with Professor Rowan, he kind of met up with the main characters more often because he was directly interested in the plot of the legendary Pokemon, and since then the professors have been more present throughout the main story. We've gotten used to having them basically right next to us during the big moments, cheering us along the entire way. Pokemon Sword and Shield did something a bit different where Professor Magnolia is hardly even memorable. It was literally Sonia that did all the work and she's rewarded for it in the end by becoming the new professor. Game Freak wants to mix things up when it comes to the long-standing tradition of some old person in a coat who gives you a Pokemon and then just buzzes off for the rest of the game. And sure, a lot of people suspected something was off about Professor Sada and Turo, but the fact that the core Pokemon experience doesn't change by them not even being around and only info dumping over the phone says a lot. The way that they get straight to the point, nearly sounding robotic in their speech, does give a hint of their true origin, but can easily be excused as them just being obsessed with their research. And when we do get the reveal of the AI professor, it feels even more sad than anything, and I'm just left with these contemplative thoughts. So yes, the story is that the true professor was obsessed with their dream of bringing Pokemon from a different age to the modern time. Eventually, they used the power of the Terra Crystals to build an exact replica of themselves and complete the time machine. These two are separate characters, and it's so interesting that we never even meet the original human professor as they're long dead. We mostly learn about them through the AI, which, while looking exactly like the original, is a completely different character. And right out of the gate, this tells us just how prideful and self-centered the original professor was. They didn't just build an assistant, they built another version of themselves, assuming this would solve everything. They do both work together and complete the time machine, but from here their personalities begin to differ. We're told that at some point the AI began to disagree with the original, which itself is fascinating. Because the AI is artificial while having the memories of the original, it thinks more logically and isn't driven by whatever emotions the original had. And so it makes sense that when the human professor is gone, the AI would try to find a solution to the problem that was created. But because the AI is artificial and was programmed by the original, it leaves them vulnerable to that programming. And this makes for such an interesting final boss fight, as the real villain isn't this robot that we've just met, but is instead the Paradise Protection Protocol, a program meant to stop anyone who would try to power off the time machine, and this makes things complicated. When the program takes over, the AI doesn't have control of themselves, so they're not responsible. Though could we call the Protection Protocol itself a villain if it's simply executing commands it was given? The program was made by the original human professor, so does that make them the villain? I mean, rather than just protecting things with a lock or password, they made sure the protocol would kick in, and that it would take away the choice of an artificial yet fully sentient being. We're also told that the human professor died while trying to save the legendary Pokemon, so we would think of this as a noble sacrifice, but at the end of the day, does it really atone for the damage that they've caused while they were alive? This is all stuff that I find so fascinating because I don't think that there's truly a clear answer, and the fact that this person is dead doesn't give us any real closure for them. In a weird way, the AI professor is much more sympathetic, especially because they have their own baggage and decisions that they have to make. For some reason, the concept of a character that's effectively the clone of a dead character with all their memories was seen twice pretty recently, with the AI Professor in Pokemon and Recombinant Quaritch in Avatar. And while I don't think either story fully dove into these characters, it's still interesting to watch, because you see them dealing with questions like what is their relationship to the original, whether they should continue their legacy or try to fix their mess, and do they have a real family? By the end of the battle, we get this curious ending to the AI's story. They decide to leave and make sure the time machine is no longer functional, as it requires them to remain in Area Zero. But rather than just being a logical defensive measure, they admit that their own curiosity has got them excited to travel through time. A little hint that they've started to develop some feelings of their own. Yes, a Pokemon game is ending with robots gaining sentience and then disappearing into time. Absolutely insane, and I love it. And this is a good ending, right? We stopped the time machine, the threat of the original professor is no more, the legendary Pokemon is happy, and Paldea is saved. But it feels incomplete. Not necessarily as if the story was unfinished, but more in the emotional sense. And it's supposed to feel this way. There was no human professor at the center of Area Zero. No parent to apologize to and reconnect with Arven. No great mentor to save the day. And not even a cool new robot friend to help build a new future. It was up to this group of kids to succeed where their elders failed. Strangely enough, a theme we saw in other parts of Scarlet and Violet. Really, we see it in how Team Star was failed by the school administration, and how Penny later attempted to take responsibility by conducting Operation Starfall. While the Pokemon League story isn't too different from the series standard, it does still end with younger trainers proving themselves against the older generation. Ultimately, Arven doesn't say too much about the professor at first, but he makes it clear that in their absence, Mabosstiff became his closest friend, and now he's taking on a role similar to that of a parent by doing all he can to ensure its safety and well-being, moving past the failures of his own childhood. And really, even though the AI professor has the appearance and memories of the original, they were created within the last few years, burdened with decades of knowledge and now finally able to use it how they see fit. They do make a difference, but sadly aren't able to live out in the new future they've created alongside the rest of the main characters, though they still get an oddly peaceful send-off. And while walking home into the end credits, we realize that as long as we have our friends by our side, the future is ours for the taking. At the end of it all, I'm still a little conflicted on how to feel about this whole story. Like I said, I genuinely love it, and it does in fact connect to the story of the main campaign. But somehow the Way Home storyline doesn't feel long enough. Though again, maybe the sense of incompleteness is part of the experience. I've seen a few theories and hypotheticals about whether the AI professor could or should return, or even what if the original professor was revealed to still be alive, but I say that this is a good place to end it. Each of their sacrifices was meaningful in their own way, and the weight of the legacy and decisions made around them wouldn't be as strong if that had happened. But let me know what you think about our robot friend from Area Zero. For sure one of my favorite characters from Pokemon in a while. And with this chapter of Scarlet and Violet coming to a close, it's time to head into a brand new future. Thank you to every channel member for your continued support, especially the great Gators, Cheeseburger Lasers, Gavnuts, Justin R, Cosmo Zero, Michaela, Mr. Pig Puncher, Phantom Pyro, Quago, Volity, and Pastel Blood. If you would like to support, get your name shouted out here as well as access to emotes and comments, live streams, and some early videos, you can become a channel member today. You can also follow me on Twitter as well, but anyway, this has been GatorEX, and I'll catch you all later.
The open world of Paldea awaits. Out here, you can meet new Pokémon. It's your world, your way. Pokémon Scarlet and Pokémon Violet. Rated everyone.